Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Coffee, Jim and James. James, we should have been hitting the record button 15
hours
minutes
ago. Yeah,
Our pregame
I'll tell
with
you
Jeff
what.
has been off the chart.
It's all downhill from here, Jimmy. I think
you would have had to edit it, though.
That's several times.
And and I was going to come in with a icon, legend, guru, all this stuff, and it was just a fun chat. We should have been recording that because
it's always about the pre-show. It's always about the pre-show.
We won't remember any of it, so we can't redo it.
I know. Have you ever had to do that before? Have you ever gave something and somebody said, "All right, I need you to do it again," and you can't help but think about the points that you really hit, and you're like, "There's no way." Yeah. You get so preoccupied with it. Ooh, sounds like EWN Con, Jimmy. Flashbacks.
I told you that I learned a lot through doing and making mistakes, right? But one of the things that I learned a long time ago is I'll never, ever read a speech. I tried it one time, and I wasn't nervous. It was just I lost my place, in that speech, and there were a lot of people there. And I was like, damn, man, I know I look like a fool here. I couldn't find where I was on this. So I go, never again. Right?
Nope.
Just have the thoughts down in logical order and then ad lib. That's really a more natural delivery anyway.
Well, and again, Jeff Wiese is joining us today. We're going to get into a little bit more particulars about him. But
I know we just assume everybody knows him, right? We just start talking
the legend, the icon, everything about Jeff Wiese.
On the wanted poster.
Well, we're going to keep that on the down low, especially in Florida or in Washington. But I'm the same way. And 2 years ago, we did a Christmas special, and it was beautiful. It was wonderful. It was all via Zoom. And James was beautiful with doing all these verbiages that I had to speak. And I am an ad lib type of guy. Give me a concept and I'll come up with the words. But all of a sudden, I'm like
locking up. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic too, Jeff. So we're all trying to figure it out at that. We'd been on Zooms and doing those things, but we had to do something special. And really the only means we had to do it was to record on Zoom. And we kind of made this, it was almost like an award show with these skits built in and things. And Jimmy was a sport. And we recorded, but it was a nightmare to record, and Jim would walk off, and it was comedy. Throw stuff, and then he'd come back, pick it all up. All right, let's do it again.
I noticed that you guys have really professional looking video and probably audio. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in my makeshift office, converted bedroom, and with a cheap little cam.
We didn't want to say anything. We're professional association over here. We really have our life together as a podcast. I'll tell you. I
used to think of myself as a professional. I have to upgrade my video and my audio. So.
And I'm even downgraded.
We'll be your Yoda. We'll take you along the trip.
Thank you.
We are looking for a third member to the band. We just saw Jeff not too long ago. I think, I'm not sure when this is airing, but back in May at our own event, EWN Con, which we'd seen him a few times before that. But Jeff, I hadn't seen you since then. We've emailed, back and forth, but good seeing you again. And thanks for coming out and joining us.
Yeah, and I told you guys earlier, I will restate that part. That was really well worth the time and the trip, right? I enjoyed myself there, met a lot of neat people, got to talk to a lot of people. You guys were kind enough to let me join a panel with Steve Allen, my buddy. And
it was a 7-hour panel.
Yeah.
Steve Allen, Jeff, the Colonel. Who else was on there?
Oh my God.
Yeah, there's so many folks. It's great.
He's an interesting cat.
All short-winded guys. They hardly ever say anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had side conversation. I'd watch them. They'd lean back, and Jeff would be talking to Steve or something while somebody else was totally talking. Like just they couldn't wait their turn. It's not
Steve
normal.
and Steve and I are both members of this pipeline safety management systems group on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Yeah,
And there's an open joke in there that when they finally turn from the speaker to the Q&A thing, who goes first? Is it Steve or Jeff? So now, like the last time was just last Friday, I just waited, and it was like a 15-second pause before I finally said, Steve, come on now. You got to go ahead, or I'm going to jump
love it.
in sooner or later.
Who's
So,
who's the head of that group? Steven.
Steve.
you know,
I don't
it's
know how to
hard
say his last name.
Yeah,
Yep, I got to meet him at AGA this year.
he's a great guy. Yeah.
He is.
He
We
and
just can't say his last name.
Wiese, I think it's something like
That's
that.
good.
I know it's Steven.
We're gonna have to have Steven on to talk about it.
You should. He and
That's what we're
Ashley
gonna do.
Donini, you know her?
Again, I wouldn't have never tried to say her last name, but yes, I know who
well,
you're
that one's
talking
easier
about.
for me to say, Donini. So I knew her before. She worked for a company that I sit on one of their boards. And I've really enjoyed working with those two. They've expanded that group. I mean, you guys ought to come on and actually be the interviewed instead of the interviewer.
What are we waiting on? What are we talking about?
Yeah, well,
Set it
Steven,
up.
I can get his contact if you don't have it. Happily set it up.
Look at that, Jimmy. We just made a deal. I think we're gonna trade services. Jeff, I met you at EWNCon. We talked about there. Well, and maybe before that, I think at APGA last year we ran into each other. But I mean, personally myself, I haven't got to sit down and really unpack Jeff Wiese, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love, and I know our audience would too, just like your journey to where you're at now. Kind of, we always like to say the origin story, right? How did you get to be the superhero in this pipeline safety
not
world?
many people that call it that, but so we don't start from the gleam in my daddy's
We
eye.
only have like 45 minutes, I think.
Yeah,
so
don't start at that point. Accelerate a few years.
Yeah.
It's funny. And we were talking about our kids earlier, right? And I'm saying, like, you try to coach your kids. You, like Jim was saying, you try to transfer knowledge from all the mistakes you've made and say, God, I just hope you don't make those mistakes, right? But they won't want to listen. But I think that to answer your question, life is like a river, right? Unless you're really actively moving, you're just going to go where it takes you, right? And it's random sometimes, right? You may end in a really good place, you may end up in a really bad place. But I think I just went along the path that said, hey, I need to go on to college after high school, very active in sports in high school. And I wanted to go to the Berkeley School of Music. I wanted to be a musician. My parents hated that idea. And despite the fact that they weren't paying for college and I paid for it for 10 years afterwards, I acquiesced and I went into what they call a pre-med program. I was ready to go to med school when I graduated from a place in Iowa.
Hold on. Don't go any further. I want to know first what type of musician. I mean, what were your aspirations? Okay.
Guitar, but all kinds of influences, from jazz to Jimi Hendrix, you name it.
Love it.
I mean, I was anybody who's got talent with a guitar, I like.
Okay.
That's awesome. Second question is then as you made the other choice, what type of medicine?
No, it was a pre-med program, so it was before you were specialized. I actually was accepted to med school, but I was too idealistic, and I interviewed 10 doctors as a project in my senior year. I didn't find one of them that really liked their job. And I was thinking to myself when I was graduating, like, hell, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go into debt forever and then come out and not like my job. What a fool. I would have been retired a long time ago if I'd have followed that path. But as it went, I just went along. I narrate this, it's got funny, we can talk sometime more casual about some of those paths, but took me on eventually on a sailing trip, met somebody, the captain of this boat that I was the boat boy for. He paid all food, all drink, all expenses, but no money, per se. But he asked me after we finished sailing from New England down to Key Biscayne in Florida, he said, hey, the wife and I really enjoy having you here. Why don't you sail with us into the Caribbean for the winter? So mistake number one was not taking him up on that. I should have gone sailing in the Caribbean.
I don't know what's happening right now. I thought this is really like an origin story. It sounds like a superhero story. Please continue.
Yeah, but it was anyway. I'll make it shorter. He talked me into going back to school because I said, dude, I got to get serious about this. Took a year off. I was a bartender. I worked high steel construction, and I was just saying this is not going anywhere fast. And he talked me into going to grad school. So I went to grad school, got really interested in ocean matters. So I got a marine affairs degree, which was interdisciplinary.
Aquaman.
It's science, economics, oceanography, economics, and public policy. Got a job while I was going to school. That eventually took me to DC. So I'm saying the river just takes you places, right?
Amen.
And so I needed money. So I took that job. And I was tired of being poor. I mean, I've been a student a long time, and you're poor as a student generally, but it got me very interested. And I spent 15 years then in offshore oil and gas. The only thing I'll really say, besides that, I loved that stuff, right? I really did. Was that I ended up on the first SMS type program to come out of Department of Interior. I was on the committee. I was the only government person on the committee. That's the story of my life. Only government person on an industry committee. So I've been on a number of industry committees, and I found that to be fascinating. Always loved it. Took that opportunity whenever I could get it.
When was that, Jeff? When was that? Just out of curiosity.
That was in the mid 90s because it followed up Piper Alpha, which was a platform explosion over in the North Sea that killed like 148 people.
Wow.
I mean, that people don't even remember Piper Alpha. And it's a perfect example of why eventually we'll come back and talk about SMS, why I think SMS is so important. I don't think people do things on purpose. I honestly, we allow them to do things through the way that we manage our operations, and sometimes haphazardly. So systematic approach to management is always producing results. At any rate, so I did that one. And during that time, I got on an interagency committee, and Stacy Gerard had the position that I eventually ended up with at DOT. And she and I were simpatico, and she said, hey, how'd you like to come work for me? And I said, oh no, actually, she tried to recruit me as her boss because her boss, there was a vacancy. And so I said, I don't think I'm qualified for that one. I don't think I'm going to be able to meet the qualifications to even compete. And she goes, well, I'm applying, so will you come work for me if I get it? And so I eventually took her spot. I spent 17 years with the Office of Pipeline Safety, which is within what a lot of people know as PHMSA, which itself is in the US DOT. Loved working for the Office of Pipeline Safety. A lot of challenges, but the last 10 years I was there, how do you present that one and say, I was the guy still standing when everybody else sat down when they said, who wants to be the next chief? All right. And I was like, what? So I did that for 10 years, being the longest. I think that's a record. for the chief of the Office of Pipeline Safety. Headed up by one of my close friends, Alan Mayberry. Now he used to be my deputy. And Linda Doherty. Do you guys know Linda Doherty?
We don't, but I was going to say we were just at LGA, and I think Alan was there, and we missed him. We wanted to have him on the show, so you're going to have to broker that too, Jeff.
I will. But I would also introduce you to Linda Doherty. Those two were my deputies for almost that whole 10 years.
Wow.
They're excellent people. Like, you just don't come better, right? Dave Merck. I don't know if you guys know him with API. He's the API pipeline guy now.
I think Steve's
Yeah.
mentioned him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's such a good guy. But he's 6'5", so you don't like to walk anywhere with him, right? So it's like towering over your head. Yeah. But a 26-year Coast Guard that really super good. Any rate, so that during that, I'll close out by saying I left there for a lot of reasons, but I'd done it long enough. I don't think I was going anywhere and achieving anything. I probably stayed too long, largely due to guilt. Don't want to leave people that you've been leading for a while. But I joined a company called TRC. That's where Monique Roberts, one of my favorite people, and I worked together there for a long time. And then in January, I just decided, hey, I'm going to pull back and go off as an independent consultant. And that's how we, sorry for that long one.
Wow.
I know.
We
covered a lot of ground there. And we ended with Monique, who we saw last week.
Yeah.
Now friend of the show, been on the show. Her episode was top notch. She's good people, and she glows about you, Jeff, just like you do about her.
We had a good time together. She's now the Pod's executive director. That's exactly what Pod's needed too. It's somebody who knows how to market and sell. And that's,
I tell you what, when she talks, I listen, that's for sure. And I'm sure a lot of people do. Jeff, I want to talk a little bit about stakeholders and the many stakeholders that you've worked with in this field of pipeline safety over the years. What has that time taught Jeff Wiese?
You mean what kind of stakeholders did we have to work with?
Yeah, like what stakeholders are you working with, and what has that done? I mean, how has that shaped what you're doing now as well?
I'd like to say it maybe taught me that, eventually compromise is the only way to make progress, right? Because these were diametrically opposed points of view in a lot of cases. So, for example, I was top level career when I was in U.S. government. Everybody above me was a political appointee of whatever administration I've worked, Republican, Democrats. Sometimes it's really hard to tell them apart based on their actions. You can tell them apart based on their words, but their actions can be a little different. So there are politicals, you got your employees, you've got other regulators. I mean, I formed a group in the federal government called the Interagency Risk Management Working Group. We had the Nuclear Regulatory Commission on there. We had the U.S. Department of Energy on there. We had NTSB. Two of the chairs of NTSB sat on that group with me. And then we had the wildland fire guys. Holy Toledo. If you want to talk about risk management, those guys are risking their life all the time, right? But so they're really keen and they were very smart. Anyway, I won't ramble on it. Just to say that I was thrilled by these meetings. And I would always find one person in each meeting and go, wow, I really need to talk to that person. And you just see them afterwards. I really enjoyed what you were saying. Can we have lunch and just chat? Right. And so eventually you build a network of people. So there's other feds, the state regulators. We had 52 state partners. This was really before the group that's known as NAPSR. You guys probably know National Association of Pipeline Safety Reps. they're much stronger now, but when I came in there, they were nothing. So it was all the states were telling you what they wanted. NAPSA would never take a position. And you go, I can't negotiate with 52 people. We'll never get anywhere. The other people that are less common for you guys, for example, might be pipeline safety trust, advocacy groups, environmental defense, the National Resource Defense Council, I think it's called, natural resource. But they were really sort of on the other side of the stage, right? Stage kind of comprised, industries over here, regulators are somewhere in the middle. You got advocacy groups over there,
Yeah.
environmental, and I think some, other ones were international. One of the things I just yesterday talked to two guys who I worked with for over 10 years internationally. They're from Canada. That used to be called the National Energy Board. It's now the Canadian Energy Regulator, CER. But they were the pipeline regulator on that side of the border. And I knew people in Enbridge, TransCanada, and all these Trans Mountain, which is Kinder Morgan, I guess. But they, the pipeline doesn't know any difference when it crosses the border, but it had different regulatory regimes. So we began meeting, twice a year. I would go to Calgary, they would come to DC. And that went on. We eventually did research together. Remember them standing up when we were building integrity management. They stood up in one of their conferences with their regulated industry and said, hey, we're learning a lot from these people on integrity management. It's coming your way. Right. So
it's funny. It's funny you say that, Jeff. This is a totally different example, but it's based on the same concept, which is, really those unique vantage points and those different angles, right, to look at problems and really going to work on it. At one of our conference, not this past one, but the one before, we were teaching a soft skills class, right? And so it was an all day class, 8-hour class, and half of it was a group of pipeline folks, like all makes and models, from compliance people to field workers to evaluators, you name it, right? Engineers. And then on the other side of this group was we had invited all of our local school districts in DFW, like teachers, council, anyone that might want to come check it out. And so we had these two groups and we were like, this might not go so well. And what was amazing was the teachers were so interested in what that group was saying, because they were saying, we need workers, and we have this worker shortage, and we need training, and this and that. And then the other side was going, we need to place people. And it became this awesome dynamic of where they learned so much from each other, and they were on polar opposite ends of spectrums. And when they came together, it was for one cause. And really, we learned it was my favorite class of all time, for sure.
But it teaches you some. We were talking about this before we started recording. Remember, it was like the simplest things. They seem simple when you say them, but it takes a long time to learn them. And one of them is to be able to listen to people, without prejudging them, right? And be able to say, what the hell, and ask questions. Don't just jump in and try to give your point of view, but ask questions like, help me understand that, which is a great line, by the way.
Absolutely.
I
Always
stole that from somebody. But yeah, I agree with you. This same thing that you just described, it happened with emergency responders and operators, right? I was with a group of them, and I utmost respect for emergency responders, right? Anybody who puts themselves in harm's way for us, we all ought to say,
100%.
Yeah. So at any rate, the emergency responders really clarified thinking on us. They always say, hey guys, to us, it's just another hazmat event. Okay. Stop thinking it's so different. We need to talk about things like communications. What channels are you guys going to be using? What kind of equipment and resources do you have, right? Are our foams effective? When ethanol came around and started being blended or transported, that was an epiphany. The ER guy said, hey, our phones nationwide are mostly alcohol soluble. I was like, what? Plus they said, that alcohol flame burns clean. It scares the hell out of emergency responders. I was like, whoa, that's important to know this, right? We need to talk to the volunteers, which make up 80% of, the emergency response community. So not to get off too far in that, but I love, many fields, damage prevention. Think about that, right? You guys know this for sure. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
excavators, locators, one call centers. We did some stuff. I was on the board for Common Ground Alliance for 4 years and then stepped down because I knew I was going to leave government at that time. The first government person on that one too. So the excavators didn't like gubbies. So I eventually turned them though. They invited me to their conference and I spoke for a little while. And one of the other board members was there and he was an excavator. And I always conclude with, now, this is the fun part. You guys ask whatever you want, right? I'll tell you if I don't think I can say that, but I'll try to answer if I can. Nobody would ask a question. So eventually this guy who was on the board with me stood up. He was a big excavator from Louisiana. He stood up and he said, he's all right, guys. I know him. You can talk to him. And then the hands start going up. And then it means you're accepted into that group again. Another lesson, right? Go with a friend.
The recovering regulator, right? That what Steve always says. I'm a recovering regulator.
He does.
Yeah.
He does.
Mhm.
James,
Yeah, it's an important role.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead. I
No,
love listening to you, brother. I mean, honest to goodness, I'm sitting here and every question I have in my head, you are pinging on all this stuff. I mean,
yeah, you guys are such flatterers. Hey, I told you, if you'd allow me, can I lay out what I was talking about before I started recording this business about I've been wrestling with this kind of chain of thoughts to figure out where's it going, and one of the things we were talking about, and again, I know you know these things, so I'm just talking about anybody else who might be listening to see if it makes any sense at all. So I welcome feedback. But I've gone places like when my kids were really small and in high school, I'll go into school and I talk to kids and I'd say, hey kids, let's talk about energy. How do you use energy? And they're like, what? What? And I go, well, does anybody have a light switch in your house, right? Yeah. Do you drive a car with your parents or you, right? Do you ever fly anywhere, take a train, a bus, whatever? You eat food, which is delivered by trucks that are burning this stuff. And eventually the point of this one is, I think the average citizen, intelligent though they may be, has never really pondered this question. Like, hey, how freaking dependent am I on energy and where the hell is that coming from? They just know they want it as cheap as they can get it, and they want it to be reliable, right? So they freak out when gas goes to 5, meanwhile in Europe it's probably about 8, right?
Right.
So and they've been used to that forever. So anyway, so the first point of it was, I think the public's generally not cognizant of their dependency on energy, and therefore everything from this point forward becomes a discussion about the costs of pipelines and delivering energy reliably, cheaply, safely. It becomes a cost-centered debate. So for example, one of the things I was mentioning to you that I was stunned. I think I told you at Energy World Net, I did a little bit of research by Energy Information Administration and U.S. Department of Energy, probably the most neutral source you can find. They released a report just a few days ago, and they said last year, primary energy production, 79% of energy produced in the U.S. was fossil. That includes coal, but I know coal has really been going down. So it's mostly oil and gas, right? 14% was renewable, and it's been growing. which is really good. And I think we talked about this before too. We all have to embrace renewable power. We've got,
No doubt.
I'm not a denier. I believe we got to change afoot, and we've got to get with it. So only 7% nuclear. Nuclear has been kind of going down really slowly for a long time. On consumption, and this was what we talked about Energy World Now, was that the bulk of our energy that we're consuming, you, me, anybody, lights, everything. They don't think about oil and natural gas when they think about lights or their computer, the internet. Oh my God, take the internet away from anybody and they freak out, right?
Right.
So,
They do it 1 to 1. And I say 6 years ago, this could have been me, is what I mean. I very well could have been in that demographic. But if, for instance, if you mention natural gas, well, I don't have natural gas at home.
right.
I'm
Well,
electric.
they
Right.
have,
No, that's what
yeah,
right. That's
yeah,
the
yeah,
1 to 1 for most people is, well, I'm all electric. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Except for, burning gas at the burner tip at your house is absolutely the most efficient way of using gas, right?
absolutely.
No
And
doubt.
power gen
Yeah.
is not all that efficient. I mean,
No, it's
you
like
lose so much.
60% lost or 60%,
Yeah, I mean, you lose
crazy number.
yeah, it is. It's almost like 60%, both in the generation and transmission through the grid. So anyway, I think we're all heading there. The point I wanted to make on that one, besides the fact that people take energy for granted and it's like a birthright, was that we're dominantly dependent on fossil fuels and primarily oil and gas. The other point that I was thinking about was that pipeline projects I've been associated with, and I'm sure you guys too, have been canceled.
Yep.
Right? They have, because of opposition. The opposition is galvanized by social media, you name it. The news loves a negative story. So nobody says, hey, by the way, we're going to kill this project, and here's what it would have delivered to you for how many years. And so now we're going to have a hard time making up for that. So I worry about the fact that we're turning down so many major projects that would have provided energy while renewables are finally getting to a place where they can,
Well,
take these hard.
and wouldn't you say, Jeff, and I think we may have talked about this before, we may have mentioned it in Dallas when we were together, but energy is almost like a 401k portfolio. You don't put all your stuff in one basket. Energy in the world, or let's do the micro, the United States. I'm for hydro and solar and wind, but I'm also for natural gas. I was in New Orleans. There was a lady sitting next to me at Drago's who had the end fossil fuels. So she wasn't with our group, okay? But she's eating charbroiled oysters,
Which are so good, by the way.
Which are
So good there, aren't they?
so good. And they're 20 feet ahead of us on a huge natural gas
Of
grill.
course.
That's the only way you can do it. And I'm like, and she was dying. I'm like, what?
That's
I was like,
fine. But let's talk about those oysters some more, though.
yeah, well,
Yeah, no kidding. Go to the
those are-
Acme in New Orleans.
Acme's
No,
good.
Drago's
Yeah.
is good.
Oh yeah, I know that. Is that the one right across the street?
No,
It's
no,
at the
no.
Hilton, but there's also one in
Hilton out at the
Metro too.
Riverside.
Oh yeah. Well, at any rate, so that the last point in that whole dialogue, was that because of all those things, because we're going to need it. We're going to need it for decades, right? We're going to need the energy provided by oil and natural gas for decades. Now, hopefully we ramp up faster on renewables, right? But we can't bank on it. So that means to me that we're going to have to rely on existing infrastructure probably longer than people had intended, right? And so that puts the pressure on the operators to do a better job of really doing risk management. That most of my career has been involved in risk management. Monique would laugh if she hears this because I've said it so many times, but it's a simple thing, risk management. People tend to overcomplicate it. To me, it means in the pipeline context, it means even offshore in that context, it means know your system, right? Know what you know and know what you don't know, right? So you can make conservative decisions. know what's around your system is number two. And that can mean it can affect you, whether it's subsidence or hurricanes or whatever, but you can also affect it. But if you know those two things, your system and what's around it, and with certainty, you can really do a pretty good job of risk management if you're intelligent and really care about safety and people. So, at any rate, I think that's where we're at. I think we're going to have to rely on this existing infrastructure even more than we may now, right? We'll probably run into capacities, and some of it's old. Like I rarely use a name.
Oh,
You can edit it out later,
no, I'm
maybe.
just kidding.
Let me just
Sure
say
call.
I'll just say this, a major East Coast aviation and motor fuel pipeline had the largest inland spill, about a year and a half ago or so. You guys know what I'm talking about. So it was the largest. That's a very old pipeline. It also suffered from railroad fatigue. The pipe was transported on rail before they had all these standards about bracing the pipe on the transport. So anyway, I've
Wow.
been rambling for a while, but it was mostly that I'm concerned that we as a country don't have a plan. US government has not had a plan, to my knowledge, in the entire time I worked for it. They would say they had an energy plan, but it didn't say, Jim, you were saying earlier, 2050, whatever it is,
Yeah.
by that date, we're going to stop, right? And here's how we're going to get there. And here are all the many parts of how we're going to get there. But the German Marshall Fund is out there and they've released a plan. I haven't read it in detail, but US government really needs to get on board with this stuff. And makes sense.
And I think it gets back to education, and I think you're you herald the idea of education and cross collaboration and sharing. Jeff, I mean, that's one of your passions, because collectively we have a lot of the answers. Individually, maybe we don't, but when we do, and I'm talking at a macro level of this, and I think that's a key to it too, whether it's everything you're talking about, risk management. You assess the United States right now in a SMS or a PSMS world. And, a lot of us think, wow, we're going great. And then others can say, well, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. We've been doing this for 20 plus years, in some form or fashion. I mean, what would you go ahead, James?
Well, I was just going to say, this is a new concept to me, or was a new concept to me about the time I met Steve Allen when he came on board with us. And so I've told other people as well. I think I just said it to Monique last week, was that I learned a lot about pipeline safety and stuff through his PowerPoints, because I worked with him to make them look better, because, he's Steve. And we love him. No, I'm just kidding. But he came to me and was like, I need your help. So we worked together, and I learned a lot that way by just osmosis and being around Steve. But how he does. Is there any advice, Jeff, for those that well, this was my point, was I remember telling Steve one time, as I said, why are y'all still going out and doing PSMS 101? And I was like, people are tired of hearing that crap. I want to hear it. And he goes, because there's still some people out there who've never heard it. and I laugh about it, but I would be at a show listening again for me the 100th time, and somebody would have that aha moment of, I gotta get moving.
Yeah.
I think that starts with that. So I was a regulator, right? And I'm recovering like Steve Allen.
Like Steve.
Happens.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amazing. I know a bunch of you.
Yeah, that's why we always hang together in case anybody's looking for us later. We can, we got two of us, but it used to irritate me. I actually threw two vice presidents out of my office one day when they'd had a nasty accident. They'd come in to explain what was going on. And they kept saying, don't worry, we have a culture of compliance. And they kept saying that phrase until I eventually said, time out. If that's the best you've got, you need to leave and come back when you want to talk to me about performing, right? Compliance is not safety, right? It is a negotiated outcome. I lived that world and I negotiated a lot of those rulemaking. The regulator doesn't set the bar that says, this would be safe if we did this. But, oh yeah, by the way, we got to pass cost benefit. We have to argue with the industry. We got to argue with the states. We got to argue with the advocates. You would negotiate and get to a place that people are willing to sign off. I'm proud to say when I was there, we never got sued on rulemakings. But that was because we negotiated an outcome. And so some people will say, you didn't go fast enough. And I go, guess what? We went progressive, you know, we would shore up our ground underneath us and move ahead. You know, you can't always.
Direction's more important than speed, right?
Yeah, well, progress is what we really ought to live for. We talked about that too earlier. It's like, man, I loved working in damage prevention. There are so many different people in that and so many different perspectives. If you're open to listening to it, you know, you can usually craft a statement. You got to ask, what's in it for them? You know, that because they're thinking, what's in it for me? And so
Right.
you might as well think about what's in it for them. The only people I really couldn't figure out, I tried, were the locators. You know, I mean, I could
Why is
figure
that?
out, well, I wanted them to do a better job, right? I wanted them to move to new technology, electronic white lining, all this stuff, right? This was a long time ago. And yet I was trying to figure out how do we get them on board? How do we get the telecoms on board? You guys know this. I mean,
Still, yeah.
they're
Yeah.
terrible. They go
Well,
through
we
drilling for
love everyone.
fiber. Yeah, they're constantly drilling underground, and you know, it's a fast job. You know, it's not paying that much. They got to make speed, so they think it's cheaper to fix it, right?
Mm.
So anyway,
If something happens, it's cheaper to fix it.
right
Right.
after the fact. So I'm sorry, it's, you know me, it's like got us distracted.
Squirrel.
But the thing on SMS was it's not mandated, right?
Right.
In fact, that was my policy. That I was on that 1175 or 72 committee, and did not want to do that because I always felt that if the operator didn't want to do it, it didn't really matter, and it was just extra paper and a waste of money, right? So you got to want to do it. And so to answer your question, I think there are a lot of operators who just really don't want to do it. They got enough other things to deal with. I would love to sit down with any one of them to say, brother, you can make money on this.
Amen.
Honestly, that was true offshore too. You can make money on this. Your insurance companies will think it. Your employees will feel
Yeah.
more invested in your company. You guys focus a lot on culture. I'm very thankful for that because very few people think about the role of culture and the success of an organization. But I would say culture is king.
Culture
They,
is king.
what do they
Wow.
say? Eat strategy for breakfast every
Yeah,
day.
that one's tough, but that is what they say. That is what they say.
I've
Jeff,
seen that before.
you, we could do this all day, really. I mean, we have done it all day. It's just like that. It sneaks away from us every time.
I
But,
know.
but
You're good.
Jeff, we we've been asking everybody a different question, and we had
Uh-oh.
you at EWN Con, and you got to answer our Be Brave question. In fact, you talked about that a little bit earlier in the pre-show. But what we're asking people is, I guess it's not really asking, but um, we kind of have a philosophy with the show of giving it all away, right? We can't take it with us. You've talked about it in different ways, different aspects of your life along the way. Um, if you could give it all away right now, what advice could you give our industry, our people, anybody coming up, whoever? What would that be?
You know, you guys are good at these surprise questions at the end of the day, but you know what? The older I get, we were talking about that earlier too. When I started out, I was young. I was kind of cocksure. I knew what was going on, right? I was really informed. And I said, the older I got, it's somebody else's line. I don't remember who. The older I got, the less I think I knew for sure. But I think that is sort of the beginning of wisdom, right? It's like understanding.
Realizing,
What's that?
realizing that you don't know.
Yeah, well, realizing you might not have a perfect handle on everything, which allows you to be open enough to learn, right? And I think that supports, well, to answer your question, James, I would say that all of us should have a goal of living a happy life, right? What makes you happy? Right? And it's like, when what are the old saying is like, when you die on your deathbed, what are they going to say? What are you proudest of having done? Right?
Yeah.
And it's probably not going to be, I was in the office really late every night, but it's true. I was, and so I think I'm getting perspective the older I get, and I'm able to coach and mentor, whether it's, I had a kid that at TRC I was mentoring, I really enjoyed that. Giving back, that's your giving back, mentoring
100%.
somebody else, take
Bringing them
time
along.
to invest in somebody, right? And help them out, right?
I
Yeah.
like that. That's good. I got to be honest. Jeff, and I'm not, we're friends, but your stories, your wisdom, your experience,
Mm.
your knowledge, just hearing all that, I could sit here for days.
It's the coffee, really. It's the
It
coffee.
really is. He'll fall off a cliff here in a couple of hours.
Have to need a nap after.
Hit that caffeine.
This
peak.
was the peak, Jeff. It
Yeah.
is. I'm not kidding. Your story and hearing the whole breadth of it. I'm not kidding. You're like a superhero in our
Yeah.
industry. So
Yeah,
appreciate you.
Sure.
Definitely not. But
Yeah.
I enjoy talking to you guys anyway. So whether we're recording or not, it's fun to talk to you.
Jeff, thanks for joining us today. Absolute pleasure.
No, thank you guys.
We look forward to many more discussions,
Yes,
on or off the air.
anytime.
Either one.
Anytime.
Next time, Jeff, you have to pick a guest to come with you.
Sure.
It can't be Steve Allen because everybody's already picked him once.
Can't take
Can't
my
have
meat.
Steve on every week. Oh, that might
Yeah.
be good. No,
Might
you
be.
can pick somebody who's been on before, but I'm telling you, Steve has already been on too many times. Can't.
We talked earlier about Alan Mayberry. What a great guy. The problem for Alan is he's currently in that job and there's only so much he can say publicly.
We might
I
have
can
to wait
say
just a
whatever.
little bit. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That happened in
on a short lived.
Louisiana. We wanted some of the regulators on, and they're like, probably not going to happen.
So the gauntlet has been thrown. Find your teammate, and we'll bring you back. It's been awesome, and we'll just tell stories next time.
Sure. Yeah, that's fun. And you can teach a lot through stories, right?
Yeah.
But I mean that. Think about when you're done working, what are you going to be proud of, right? What are you really going to be proud of? Hopefully you develop some other people and you made the organization stronger and smarter, right?
Amen.
Cool.
Amen to that.
All right, guys.
Thanks,
Great
Jeff.
time with
Great
you.
having you on.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Till next week. We'll see you all later.